Terry, are you all set? I'm all set. Okay. Everybody make sure your microphones are on, please. Okay, I'll call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee of the Town of Nantucket. Just a reminder to everyone, we are being videoed and we are live on TV for all your family and friends at home. Can I get an approval of the agenda, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And now I'll open the floor to public comment. Please, or that one, and please state your name when you, yeah, thank you, Peter.
They will specify for things not on the agenda, so people know.
Sorry?
Just public comment for things not already on the agenda.
Correct.
Hello, my name is Kathy Greeter, and I'm here tonight with a letter to the Nantucket Finance Committee. We, the undersigned, are family members, residents, and friends of our island home. We're asking the Finance Committee to please support our island home override, and I've got 49 signatures on the letter. So I just wanted to present that to the committee tonight and hope you'll consider override. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there any other public comment? We will be talking about the citizen warrant articles in respect of, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, of course not, the leaf blowers and the traffic study in a minute. I'll ask Julia to step up and discuss those with us. But is there any other public comment outside of those two topics? If not, I will close public comment. Thank you very much. Okay, so next on the our agenda is adoption of minutes for the 18th. We did the 18th? Terry, you're killing me here. Okay, well, I haven't read the 21st, the 23rd, or the 27th, so we won't do those tonight. Thank you. Minutes and I are not friends. Okay, so Julia, may I ask you and Grant to please come to the microphone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a document that was sent to you, I think, a short while ago. I have it in print as well, if any copies will need to go to the public as well.
Thank you.
Is that what we have in our email?
I don't know, I haven't
Please.
looked at it.
Yes, that's
We did get it, but it got late.
Yeah, I haven't looked at email list.
So I think we'll start with the leaf blower article.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a continuation of a discussion that we've had at prior meetings. It's for a proposed ban for gas-powered leaf blowers that's proposed in the article to take effect December 1st, 2020. And we were to report back on our outreach and on some of the comments that we may be getting from landscapers and a couple of other things that hopefully will be addressed in the document that's before you. So that this switch, like we've discussed before, the switch from gas-powered to largely electric tools or leaf blowers in this case is something that's happening. We talked about this prior, but other places than Nantucket. And since our last meeting, we've had, I think, some encounters with some great organizations off island that are sort of leading in transitioning communities to what one would call maybe a quieter community. And we found this particular organization called quietcommunities.org. They're actually based in Lincoln, Mass. And we're engaging in discussions with them in terms of strengthening the outreach, the education, and I'll give you a little bit more information about that. But effectively, the research that we've bolstered up since our last discussion has been around, some of the numbers surrounding a switching. So, the largest benefit that we see for the community is really the reduction in noise. And studies sort of show that depending on the tool that you're using, moving to electric will reduce noise from 40 to 70%. So there's no small reduction. And we really think that, one of the bigger positives for the community could be that we would lower the number of complaints that maybe the town has to deal with, and certainly that potentially landscapers are getting from their customers, and improve generally customer satisfaction. But there are a whole other set of benefits attached to moving towards electric. And I'd say that air quality is no small. I actually didn't realize how big of a deal it was. But when you start looking into it, you have folks like Edmunds, the car guys, who studied this in 2011, and this is sort of widely known, and we have some good references in here. But effectively, a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke gas-powered leaf blower is emitting more carbon monoxide than a car. And in this case, they were comparing it to a Ford F-150 traveling for 3,900 miles, comparing that to 30 minutes of operating a gas-powered leaf blower. A little mind-boggling, but something to think about as we talk about this. We really think that this would improve the landscaper. Sort of talking to landscapers, what we found is that we really think it improves the productivity. Not just things like for folks who've already moved towards electric, they talk about, no mixing of gas, less trips, fewer trips going to the gas station, possibly, the ability to be on site with the customer when the customer is there, not having to leave necessarily. And for the workers, it also means, lighter tools. I think we've already gone over some of these, but for the folks who are in the audience. And ultimately, it also leads to little to no maintenance of these tools. We've already talked about the fact that some of the on-island landscapers who have moved towards this have experienced, little to no maintenance within 2 years of owning these tools. And I have a little chart comparing sort of the finances that go along with that, and I'll talk about it in a second. One of the questions that came up last meeting was, Mr. Schaefer, I believe you were asking about the duration of the battery in terms of a leaf blower. So the leaf blower isn't typically used full throttle for an extended period of time, so on and off. So the discussions we've had and what we've seen on, let's say, a manufacturer like steel, the battery lasts 30 minutes, full throttle, continuous use at maximum potential. And so that would likely mean that you were changing your battery once or twice a day, depending on the use. This is the typical what we've seen from sort of intermittent use and what we've heard from experiences from other landscapers here. I think another question that we had last time was sort of trying to compare the cost, which I think was a big question. So if you want to look at the chart, and for anyone who wants to look at this, we have extra copies. Hopefully that's helpful. So we're looking at a steel product, which is a higher end product in the commercial use. A unit is without any discount, for sort of large quantity buying or whatnot. A unit for gas powered is roughly $280 versus a battery powered that is $380. So we have a difference of $100 there. You have to purchase batteries the first time around. So year one, there's obviously an investment. The batteries can range from $225 to $250 each. And so typically you would assume that you would need 2 batteries for one tool so that you can swap. So you can talk about, we said $450, really could be up to $500, but call it $450 for this purpose of the exercise, 2 batteries. And then you'd be purchasing a charger. Charger's $150. A high-speed charger is $180. And so we opted for the $150, but factoring in the $180 wouldn't change this very much, frankly. Now, we've had some discussions with local folks, and then we've also been using some tools, some research online in terms of what the cost is for the maintenance and labor of a gas-powered tool. We're assuming here that a team would largely be doing it in-house, so buying parts. The estimate is, per year, the maintenance on a gas-powered might be $30 for parts. And then you'd probably we assume 2 hours, $50 for labor. That's probably a conservative estimate. Fuel, oil, and labor of actually going to the gas station. So we factored in, actually, we thought the steel estimates were really high based on what we heard locally, so we slashed that in half. And that's why we ended up with a $225 of fuel, oil, and then $100 of labor of basically driving, number of people in a truck going down to the gas station. Obviously, you're making fewer trips if you're not having to go for your tools. So that would be maintenance would be $80 a year total. Fuel would be $325, fuel, oil, and labor. So your investment in year one under a gas-powered tool would be $685. And for battery-powered would be $980, maybe a little closer to $1,050 if we opted for some of the higher-end chargers or whatnot. So the difference is roughly $300. That's in year one. And if you factor in year two, where your maintenance is roughly $400, maintenance and fuel, you can see that the payback is roughly, it's under 2 years, a year and a half effectively. And so we sanity checked this with something that was done by consultants online for an organization that's actually listed on here, AGZA, and they had 18-month payback. So I think that that's probably a good estimate to go with. $300 in year one, if you had 10 customers, I mean, it seems like there would be ability to pass through, one would hope. So we've gone through, last time I was here, I said we had a list of 91 landscapers. We're now at 100. Some of that might be, a conservation foundation, a land bank. Some of these are not necessarily pure landscapers, but we've got them on the list. We've gone through the first 25. I know that's not a lot, but it's middle of January. A lot of these people are somewhere very warm and nice right now. And I know that there are likely more opposed than what we're finding right now, because we may have gone, originally directly to some of the folks who are saying we're in, but we found 18 yeses out of 25. Like I said, so we found 4 no's, 4 that did not support the article. And it doesn't mean that in the 18 we don't have some folks saying, I do have some questions and I would love more education. But what we're working on right now is continuing our outreach, which I think is really critical. We're talking to other organizations like the Quiet Communities in Lincoln to talk about doing some live demos here, because I think a lot of the education needs to be done around, these tools are efficient, these tools can do the job. And then if this passes at town meeting, what we would hope is that we would help landscapers pass this information and the message back to the customer in the chance that there has to be an offset to the customer. And we would also hope that we would put together, structure a plan so that we can dispose properly of the tools, of the gas-powered tools when the switch is made. That's roughly my update.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to speak to this? Thank you.
Thank you. Tobias Glidden. I'm a board member of Act Now, and I just wanted to add in, having contributed to writing the article in the first place, that, in my mind, something that really came on strongly last year was, there was a lot of conversation around new taxes in the community for short-term rentals. And so I thought a lot about what separates Nantucket, why come to Nantucket versus a lot of the Cape towns. And we chose our short-term rental tax structure a little differently than the Cape. And a number of you will be aware of that. And so I really think of this article as an opportunity to distinguish Nantucket, to offer more value to summer folks, but especially to year-round people. I can't tell you how many times I've had a hard day, and it's just so nice to hear silence and not hear a leaf blower. And that really contributes to the well-being of our community, and that has a lot of benefit. Lastly, I just wanted to mention, the FinCom's purview is really, what are some of the costs of the town going to be? In this case, we're really trying to present to you that there's really no costs, but potentially a lot of savings. In any organization, you've got a lot of costs associated with, following up on calls, complaints. At the police department are pretty much a nonstop drawl. And so this gives an opportunity to try to reduce noise complaints coming into the police department. And also, lastly, I just wanted to add in, this is very much in line with the town's new noise bylaw and policy that reduces the usage of tools late at night. So it's very much kind of following the footsteps laid out by the select board. Just wanted to add in those comments and say thank you so much for your support.
Can I ask a question? Totally end with
the battery situation, it's just, you say 30 minutes, okay, but on and off, on and off, on and off lowers the capacity usually in a battery. It discharges quicker when you're using it on and off, on and off. So let's just say it was 20 minutes, okay, or 25 minutes, okay? How long what's the normal time would be on a property? 10 minutes?
So my understanding from what, maybe not exactly the scenario you're talking about, but the discussions we've had are, depending on the time of year and the type of work that we're doing, if we're doing a fall cleanup or if we're just doing a little sweep through, then we will typically be changing the battery either once during the day, so we'll need 2 batteries that day, or we'll literally be using 1 battery for the day because it's not a heavily used tool during that time of the year, if you'd like. Does that make sense? So if we have
30
a
minutes will supply enough time to do all the properties they're doing in a day?
the team who we're talking to, and I think I can name the company because they're really highly supportive. So Ernst has been switched over on a lot of their tools for roughly 2 years, and what they say is they'll typically send out a team with 2 batteries, a charger, and a tool, and that'll last them for the day. So it depends on the charger. If you've got a high-speed charger, I believe it's 35 minutes. If you don't have a high-speed charger, I think it can be. So if you there are 2 ways that Steele looks at it. They look at charging to 80% or charging to 100%. If you're charging it to 80%, it's 60 minutes on the slow speed. If you're charging it 100%, it's 90 minutes.
And you can plug it into your car cigarette lighter, the recharger?
You could plug it in wherever you could find a source of power, yes.
Thank you.
Julia, don't go away. Of the 4 who were opposed to it or not in favor of the idea, what were their concerns?
I think, and I may ask Anna Puza, our new community outreach specialist. She's been doing a lot of this work. I believe that some of the concerns are, I'm not sure that the tool I'm using right now would be as effective if it were a battery-powered tool. So that's something that we haven't necessarily addressed, but we'd love to look into that because I think that's a valid concern. If there's an application that cannot be used in an electric context, we haven't seen that anywhere. But again, people's experiences might be different. I think that there's, definitely a question of how much does it cost? What am I going to be looking at? I think those are the general concerns. Yes, she gives me the thumbs up on.
If I'm putting myself in the shoes of a smaller landscaping company with potentially limited cash flow, and now I have to, in the next 8 to 9 months, make a sizable investment for me, right? Not necessarily in the grand scheme of things, but for my business. So is there any flexibility on the timing of this being effective to be of assistance to some of these, because one of the things about companies on the island, you want to do the right thing for everyone that you can, and not just, it's easy for the big ones to absorb a capital purchase, but it might not be easier for the smaller ones.
Yeah, I think just to sort of answer the first part of the question in terms of what we heard from the bigger landscapers, was you need to talk to the smaller guys because they might have a harder time. Like we didn't have a hard time passing this through, but that would be my concern if I were you. So we went to some of the smaller guys. Honestly, we haven't gone through the whole list yet. Okay. But we found some that have already switched. We found some that are super pro, and of course, I'm going to say I'm sure we found at least 1 or 2 that are saying, I'm not sure that I would agree to this. So whether we'd be flexible, I think that the question is, there's going to be a lot of time spent on doing this in the next few months. We don't have all the answers right now. I think that, we're here to get the support from FinCom. That's a big deal to us. We'd love to hear sort of what you have to offer, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.
Any other?
Joe, did you have a question? Oh, no.
I'm mulling it.
Okay. I'm curious, if this should fail at town meeting, will you continue your advocacy on the kind of ROI basis and sort of working with the landscapers on the merits of this for them that's not from a bylaw perspective?
I would hope so. I would hope that that's, part of our role is education and outreach generally. And so, if there's a social good of just moving towards electric, it feels like, I started on this journey not really knowing what was going on with the rest of the world. And it feels like this is where we're headed. And so it feels
Okay,
like
and
the
then
right
just-
thing to do regardless.
This is only commercial, right? So it doesn't,
At this point, it's only commercial.
so I would think it's going to increase complaints, not decrease complaints. I know that was one of the concerns I think that got passed around from the department heads, because I think people are going to say, I don't know how many complaints come in about leaf blowers now, but I would think people will say, hey, I just saw someone with a leaf blower, please go bust them.
That's a good point, that there may be a hurdle to get over initially. And in fact, we haven't actually gotten the numbers for complaints. Not that I'm not trying to get those. So I think that that's a valid.
Either they hear someone residential and, don't know whether they're residential or commercial, because you don't know if you necessarily, or they hear some kind of other two-cycle engine, right? And that's the part, one of the things that's confused me about this. It seems we're really singling out leaf blowers here, but I mean, I hear probably more two-cycle hedge trimmers and two-cycle other gas-powered equipment than the blowers, and I don't know, it just seems very muddled to me.
I'm not the expert on tools. Clearly, there's probably experts much more around me, and I'm sure some folks in here, but I think there's a different sound to the different tools. So I mean, the demo that I've been at was, you could hear a hedge, but I hear
Well, if
that
you
somebody
don't know,
might
all the
know.
research you've done, I think the people.
No, my point is-
certainly won't know.
Yeah, no, so I think a hedge trimmer sounds differently than a blower. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
But I think that's a valid point of how many complaints are we getting right now? And, do we think it could increase complaints for a little while? There's probably an enforcement period.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one question. You don't seem to have any sort of recourse, like if there is a citation or, so is there already something that, like, do you get fined? Is there an amount of money? I mean, what's incentivizing people to do it other than the complaint?
So I think that's something that can be built with the town. I don't necessarily think that we wanted to put down what those numbers were.
Okay.
If I could add in to what Julie just said as well, there already is a fine process for violating
Noise.
the noise bylaw, so it'd fall in line with that.
Okay. That's what I thought. That's
Yeah.
why I wasn't sure.
And then lastly, I just wanted to add in, we had a lot of discussion about including hedge trimmers, but we didn't want to try to force everybody into this. So we're trying to prime and say
Well, yes, you did.
well, but
You're proposing a bylaw to force people to switch from gas to
right. Oh yeah, but I guess maybe alternatively is the governor came out last week and said he wants to see a push to 100% renewable energy, net zero by 2050. That's 30 years from now. So we have an opportunity as Nantucketers to take a little leadership ourselves and have a little control over our destiny, but also give an opportunity in the future to prime people and say, hey, leaf blowers, we got those through. Maybe in the future there might be something else. Let's be conscious of that and look at those economics and make those good business decisions as we go forward.
Julia, I looked up in Consumer Reports before I came, and they're very favorable for electric, but they did say that the power of the electric, first off, the strongest ones have to be plugged in, which obviously wouldn't work. The battery ones are not as strong as the ones that get plugged in. But secondarily, they said that the capacity is not the same as the gas-powered ones. And it's fine for leaves, but when you get to anything that's more than just dry leaves, the gas-powered ones are considerably better.
So I'm not sure what you were looking at, and certainly the technology's changed a ton. So looking at a 5-year-old study,
I think this was 18 or 19.
quite possibly, and I'd love to see that because it's important what you're saying. What we're finding is trip to outdoor power certainly proved to say that this is the one. Everyone's using it who wants to go electric. They love it. We love it, and that was
It's
pretty
probably
powerful.
good. I just wonder whether they would need to have one gas one for like wood chips and things like that. I mean, you can't blow with an electric blower.
If they had a really massive backpack, gas powered, there's a chance that, I'm not sure exactly what they're blowing around if they're trying to do that.
Thank you. Hi,
Hi, sorry, he's really loud.
that's okay.
I'm Laura, and I've been doing landscaping on the island for 11 years and working in the industry actually since I was 12. And my thought initially, I understand the thoughts behind going from gas to electric, but after thinking about it more, I don't think that it makes sense because, so I worked for Ernst actually for 8 years, and then I ended up starting my own company where I managed 5 estates, and one of them is 26 acres. I went towards trying to go towards the electric way. And so I bought a DeWalt electric powered blower, and the client doesn't really care about the time there. I was there every day. So I would always try to use a broom or rake. But when I would just go around at the end of the day to blow, the DeWalt battery operated one, after using it for about 5 minutes, the power, like, you could barely even blow anything. And I think one huge thing is, like, clients, now I work for a larger company and I took my clients on with him, but the clients don't want you plugging something into their outlets. So you can't really say that, you could plug in the source to use other batteries because people don't want you going on their deck and plugging something in. Also, for the time, like, one of my properties is 26 acres and another one's 10. And if you're going to tell a client that 1 year for a fall cleanup, it costs this amount for the past 5 years, and then you go to battery operated, there's no way that you could do a cleanup efficiently, and it would make the cost like 10 times more. We don't go through and use a blower unless necessary. So a lot of the smaller properties, I have the girls use a broom, but there is a huge need for the gas powered blowers. And I just feel that, if you ban the gas powered blowers, then they're going to want to ban the lawn mowers and they're going to want to ban the hedge trimmers. And I think that there's bigger issues that should be tackled rather than the blowers. Also, going from working for a big company to starting a small company, the cost of that is a lot. And even though there's so many landscape companies on the island, it could get really competitive. And the bigger companies, they'll always have those clients. But a lot of the clients, at the end of the day, they look at the bottom line number. And, for a lot of the smaller companies, if you're making them switch and having to, dispose of all of their equipment that they've invested in and go to battery operated, that's a huge cost. But also, it does make the maintenance costs for the clients increase. So I think that's something to consider. Also, I think that when doing this research, instead of just proposing something that you don't know a lot about, like, if I would say that, if I was to propose it, then I'm out in the field and I'm working with that equipment every single day, and I'm working with small companies, large companies, and I've been doing it for a really long time. But if I'm not somebody who's working in the field and doing it, then how can you try to push something that is actually changing the livelihood of a lot of the people on Nantucket? And if it's something that, people want to push, then I think that they should go out there and actually get the electric blowers and actually compare them for themselves versus the gas powered, because you can't just read something online and assume that it's the better way. Because I thought the DeWalt, blower was going to be great, and it's a piece of shit. So, sorry, Paul. But but I think that, it's great to do your research online, but it's important to go out into the field. And it's also important, if you are proposing to use something that's electric, then, go out and meet with the landscape companies, big and small, and show them what you're proposing, what products that you're going to use, and have us test them out. Because I'm not opposed to trying new ideas. I'm not saying I'm totally against it, but to just ban something off of, research that you read online is not okay with me.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Please.
How would you feel about it just if it was in a more limited area? You know, someone on 26 acres, that's really not a noise problem, I think, is Tobias's point.
Yeah.
And so I was curious about that. There are plenty of properties where no one's hearing what's going on.
I think it's challenging because when you go out during the day, like, you know, it's not like we never have to go back to the gas station to get gas for a blower. You know, we have our gas can. And you go out for the day and like for some of those smaller properties, depending on the work that we do, like if we're doing a fall cleanup, then we might use a blower. But if we're not doing a fall cleanup, then, you know, the guys might use a blower at the end after they mow. But it's not like we're using the blower every single time. But I think it gets tough to kind of say like where you could use a blower and where you can't, because there's kind of a gray area. So I think it's something that, you know, to consider, but I think that makes it like super tricky.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Can I ask Julie another question? I just want to make sure I heard it right. So your modeling on this is based on you think these get used 30 minutes a day total across. So if someone goes to 6 properties in a day, you think it's 5 minutes apiece with the blower roughly, or maybe the 6 properties is wrong.
So I don't want to walk into a
I'm not trying to trap.
Okay?
I
Because
honestly
I
am
feel
not
like I'm
trying
going
to
to walk
trap
in
you.
one. But
Yeah.
what we've heard from landscapers is that who are using the electric tools right now is that depending on the type of work, they either have the use for 1 battery or 2 batteries that day for a blower. So
Because I'm just sitting here thinking if it's just a half an hour a day, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. Like maybe you'd be better served going after nail guns and skill saws, which to me are like a persistent all day thing. Than something that's being used 5 minutes a day. That seems like not much of a bother.
I think that one of the reasons that we brought this one forward is because it's resonated with folks. So it resonated as something that's been done in other communities. It's something that's more of a national movement than certainly nail guns.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm curious if you can get us some statistics about the number of complaints so we can compare that to the number of people whose livelihoods will be affected, whose businesses will be impacted by this. That would be one thing. Another is the national movement that you talk about, if you can give us some information about some other towns that have implemented it. Usually when a bylaw like this goes in, we can find some news articles about it. We can hear some other discussions, some points that maybe weren't raised from your presentation or from the public comment.
Absolutely. So I think that what I'm just so you're clear on both Quiet Communities and the Alliance for Green Zone. I'm not going to get it right, but AGZA, which is on your sheet of paper as well. They have some of the sort of more up-to-date information, and my understanding is it's in the hundreds of communities that have done this, not necessarily the thousands at this point, but I can get you some information about that.
And then the last piece would be when the town expanded its sewer district, and there's certain areas where there wasn't the ability to install gravity sewer lines, so they had low pressure systems, and the town went out and secured a contract for lower cost subsidized grinder pumps on individual homes, so reduce the cost on people who were forced to comply with the new sewer district, right? People who were forced to tie in. So I wonder if that's something that your organization would spearhead, you know, a mass purchase of whatever device is determined to be the best, so that everybody can have a lower cost and there's less of an impact, especially on those smaller companies.
So I guess one, I would say that the sewer connection fees are a lot higher than what we're talking about here. Those are massive dollars for most folks.
But the cost of the pumps might be a better analogy if you focus just on that one piece. So where it's forced on businesses, just as it was forced on private homeowners, the town thought that would be a good thing to do. And I wonder if your organization would see some wisdom in that.
Yeah, the town kind of control the number of connections and the parameters, but I can appreciate what you're saying, and we've definitely
Wouldn't
been in
the control
discussions.
here be the same because you're applying it universally to everybody who's in the landscaping business? So you're deciding that it's everybody who's in the
Right. So
business.
knowing what that ultimate number is probably important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's something that we are in fact exploring. It's just not something that we've structured right now. There's a couple things that we're looking at that, is in the ongoing basket right now.
A couple of things related to reducing the cost burden.
It would be nice to understand, yes, if there are ways of doing that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So at this point, I would suggest that we move on to the next topic, unless there's more questions from FinCom members about leaf blowers? No?
We want to see if there's more.
Is there,
Surprised there's not more.
yeah, I'm going to ask. Anyone else in the audience want to speak on leaf blowers? Yes, thank you. Please come up to a microphone and state your name.
Hey, my name's Sarah Decker. I'm actually a mechanic at Outdoor Power. I know most of you guys do that. I understand what they're trying to go with the whole electricness, but when you're talking clearing a land, you're talking Bartlett Tree Experts, KJP, Shampoo, Atlantic. You got some of these big name companies that are going in there clearing these lands for these people with chainsaws and everything else. All those sawdust chips and everything else goes on their neighbor's yard. You can't necessarily go over with a broom and a rake in a flower garden, so you have to use a blower. Those battery-powered blowers are not going to move wood chips. They're not going to move the stuff as much as a gas-powered is. The reason why these guys have all gas-powered is because it goes faster. Yeah, you got to deal with the ethanol, the dirt, the gas, and everything else, but with the electric, if it rains, everybody has a day off. If it's foggy, everybody has a day off. If it's damp out, everybody has a day off. Cannot use electric in any kind of dampness.
Because it just doesn't move the stuff because it's stuck to the
No,
ground?
because once everything starts to move and it makes contact with that battery, you got water making a connection to an electrical connection,
Okay.
which automatically just shuts the unit off. I mean, I would like you to also reach out to the companies that you've talked to that have switched over to electric. How many of them have had to be replaced because they used them in rain? Because they used them after a morning of fog. I'm not against it, but you gotta do the more research and understand with these bigger companies, they can't handle a little gas-powered backpack or gas-powered blower. Even if it's a gas-powered backpack, it doesn't move half as much. And actually a friend of mine did the test a couple weeks ago. We had a couple friends over and they each took it and they had one had a tennis ball, the other had a tennis ball, and they ran and they went down. I mean, we were drunk and stupid, but
I was going to ask if next time there could be a video. Exactly. That's where
we'll
we're going.
have to get to that. But I mean, it's something to think about and understand that this also is almost a foot in their door, in the door for. Next thing you know, it's going to be banning hedge trimmers, banning weed whackers, banning cutoff saws. Next thing, it's going to be banning lawnmowers. Okay, you as a homeowner, somebody that owns a tractor, 38 to 46, 48-inch tractor, you can cut your yard. Sometimes some people can do it in a half hour, 20 minutes. Other people might take a little longer. You have to push them over to the little 18 or 19-inch, little 21-inch push mower. Guess how many hours that's going to add to it? Because they don't make electric big mowers that are affordable for a homeowner or affordable for even a commercial guy. I mean, I want more research done, and she did say that she reached out to 25 out of the 100 landscapers. There's probably more than that. Who knows? Because you got all these people that run their side stuff and everything else. Talk to more of them. Yeah, it's wintertime, most of them aren't here. Give it some time, talk to more of them, and then come back and see what their reactions are going to be. Because with me, I know most of the landscapers. It goes hand in hand. You got some people that are like, yeah, well, I like it, which that's great, but that's the type of individual person that they are. They like that. The other one, you can talk to them, but they're like, no, because they know what they need. They know the power that they need. They know the equipment that they need.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for that. It was an excellent discussion, very helpful. And I suggest we move on to the traffic study. So Julia or Grant, which one of you would like to I knew you were gonna ask me that, Peter.
only need the number.
She only knows 11.
69.
Thank you. I'm not fast enough on reading them. Hi, Grant, thank you.
Quick update, Grant Sanders. I work for ACT Now. I'm paid by ACT Now. So since I was last in front of the FinCom talking about this subject, we've had a number of really productive meetings with commercial delivery companies, Cape Cod Express, Sid Wainer, and US Foods. And we've also had 2 meetings with restaurant owners and people who work downtown. And so we've had really great discussions about what the problem is and what can be done about it. And from what I understand, this the idea of raising awareness of this subject has caused the NP and EDC to sort of talk a little bit more about downtown deliveries, and also has caused the Steamship Authority to think a little more about how many big trucks they put on early morning boats and how they manage that. The ultimate problem is that the steamship is at 90 plus, 95, 96. The number is tough to nail down, but they're at capacity for freight right now. So a new boat's going to have to be put in service at some point.
Grant, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think there's probably some members of our audience who aren't actually fully aware of what the article is that you're proposing.
Okay.
So if you could just outline that first and then carry on. I'm
All right.
sorry. I should have started with that.
No worries. So the impetus behind this article is to create a pilot program where we can generate some data and really understand the problem that is happening downtown during the day with regard to traffic and whether commercial deliveries are having an impact on that traffic. So the original proposal was to create a pilot program where we use technology to track commercial vehicles and their deliveries, and also limit the time to certain times early in the morning and early in the afternoon or later in the afternoon. We're not as wedded to the time stipulations within the article, and that's something that we could work out in an amendment if we needed to. But we do really believe that this particular problem is worth studying because the data of how many trucks and cars are coming into the downtown every day and what the traffic situation is like morning, noon, and night is not something that we have really put our arms around yet as a town. And we'd really love to be a part of the solution that helps get that data to everyone.
Thank you. So you were saying you've had great discussions with some of the people you've met with so far?
Right. And, they haven't all loved the article, but we've had really productive discussions about ways to solve the problem and also ways to make the article better. And we're still looking forward to talking with the Steamship Authority in the coming week or so. And we'll probably have a pretty full understanding of what the options are after that meeting.
Are there any significant changes that you've already made in your mind that you're going to put through on the warrant, on the article?
In my mind, yes. I don't know if we've really discussed them as a group and with the board, but we have not taken anything off the table yet.
I am,
What do we do with that?
I thought they were dividing up the article.
as of right now, the article is as the article stands. Is that correct? As proposed, so
Yeah.
the trucks can only go in between certain hours in the morning and certain hours in the afternoon.
So, Julia Linder from ACT Now. So, when the last time we were here, we talked about looking at an amendment for this article. Okay,
Right.
and we know that we've gotten a lot of resistance from both restaurants and delivery companies. I can sort of I want to reinforce what Grant said about how productive this has been in terms of trying to improve and make progress with the current situation. You know, whether it's this summer or next summer, we're already talking about some pretty neat changes for the downtown deliveries to make them more efficient, to get the trucks out of there as soon as possible. So because we always have too many vehicles wanting to go in the same, in the same area during these peak hours. So I think that what we're comfortable saying at this point is that we want to make this article work, and we would like to propose an amendment. We need a little more time. We really want to have this meeting with the steamship, and it's been a little harder to schedule this one than maybe some of the others. And we're hoping that you'll work with us to just buy us a little more time before you vote on it.
Okay.
Julia, I'm wondering whether you've spoken or carried out any modeling regarding the capacity, especially in regard to the volume of food that comes into the island on a daily basis, say in the 3 months, or have you worked closely with sort of a major subset of the transportation industry here, and insofar as how they manage to how they manage to actually supply the food, and how changes might impact their costs and the operation of the steamship as well. So, because I think if you haven't done that, you're not actually, you're blowing smoke.
Well, so that the article is to find, is to dig, right? Because we don't have a clear understanding of what the situation. We know congestion is a multifaceted problem. Mm-hmm. We know we're not pinging it on one part of, on delivery trucks for the whole. This isn't the whole island's problem. This is one facet of the problem, mm-hmm. And we think that the great news is that our discussions with the delivery companies have proved, productive. Where we're saying, would you partner with us in terms of exploring, whether it's use of technology or sharing of information to try to figure out what does it look like? Because at this point, no one has any ideas. And this is why we sort of honed in on this issue, because it was clear and apparent that there was a lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Julia, the challenge for me was what we spoke about the last time you were with us, which was there's excellent on collecting data and doing a study and trying to understand the problem. When you couple it with then saying, and trucks can't be downtown between these hours, you've already skewed the study. So you're setting an artificial condition that makes the data collection, frankly, not good. So that is still, if you will, that's still been my sticking point with get more data, get the study, understand what we need to do, come up with a sensible answer, work with all the components that have to weigh in and should weigh in on what the answer should be. Oh, by the way, you can't be in there between 5 and 10 and 3 and 5. And so that's a disconnect, and it's still a disconnect for me. I haven't been able to reconcile with the intention of we want to know what the problem is and study it.
Yep. And I think that if anything, we've generated amazing discussions, and it's not that we haven't generated some opposition to this. So we recognize that, and we recognize that we want to make this work. Would love to share, any amendment with you guys, but also with, the folks that we've been meeting with to go in this more clearly, if that makes any sense. So we have support from people that we have been talking to who have been involved, restaurant owners, delivery companies. And at the end of the day, we see that there is going to be progress made. And it's not that we're going to come in and change everything. It's that a lot of folks are working really hard at this problem, but it is definitely a conundrum.
Thank you.
Can we back up for a second?
Of course.
Why don't you just identify what the problem is? I think that would help me, because you just talk about the problem, and I want to know what it is. I don't run into huge problems with delivery trucks myself, so obviously
so it depends
I'm out
on
of the
who
loop.
you talk to. If you talk to a restaurant owner, they might say, "Look, I just want to get my delivery. You know, I need to operate. I don't necessarily want to be there early to get a delivery to, and I'm sure some of these folks can speak for themselves if they, I don't necessarily want to speak for them, but I think I can recall what some of the comments have been, that it's hard enough to get a delivery here if the weather is cooperating in the summertime when, you know, if the food truck who's got my delivery isn't on the first boat, then it doesn't get to this spot, you know, by a certain time, the high-speed boat shows up, and all of a sudden, you know, sort of a domino effect, and there's sort of an issue with the schedule for the rest of the day potentially. So it's a difficult proposition, I think, for restaurant owners just generally. They just want to get their food in time for their lunch or for the dinner service. And I think that for the delivery companies, the message is a little bit different. For the delivery companies, it's about, you know, getting in as soon as possible, you know, knowing that the restaurant owner doesn't necessarily want to be there at 5 a.m. and can't, you know, they can't show up until the first boat, 5:30. They show up basically their first delivery, 8 o'clock. But depending on the service provider that we're talking to in terms of perishable foods, in terms of the Sid, you know, the Sid Wainers, the U.S. Foods, they want to be there. They want to get to the loading zones. The loading zones are not necessarily optimal, so there's progress on that's being done on that, and that's, you know, through the traffic study work group. And so we've been having a lot of discussions with Nat Lowell because he is sort of the keeper of a lot of this information in our town, and the connector of a lot of this. And you know, it's tricky because so we're talking about, you know, short-term loading zones downtown to get more trucks that can have the workspace to get in, out, so they don't have to park in a spot that's not a loading zone because they're going to make their delivery regardless. They have to do it. So those are the kinds of issues. And of course, for the delivery truck, it's about the steamship. They get their schedule, and that schedules have already come out for next summer. They get the schedule, and it sort of is what it is. And that's where there needs to be a little more understanding, certainly from our perspective, to see how that whole side of it works.
So Julie, it sounds like your ultimate article is going to be many different facets, not just the time that you're allowed to have a big truck downtown. Is that correct? I mean, you're talking about changing loading zones and this and that. Is that all part of this, or is that just something separate?
These are things that are happening kind of regardless. These are processes that are happening within the town, and there are ways of sort of signaling, channeling information, communication channels to make things more efficient. Does that make sense? Sort of. So connecting the pieces for folks so that, you know, we can move in the right direction.
I'm also curious about one other thing. It seems that with your previous article, you're very concerned about noise, but wouldn't this actually add to noise at an earlier time and be a concern for people who are downtown, Airbnb, the hotels, people who live on the second floor?
Right. So I guess what I would say is I'd rather if you looked at this one as a pilot study at this point, because I think that, you know, it's just a question of getting the amendment in front of you. You know, the hours that are there are likely not workable. So that's our understanding of where we're headed.
Members of the public, who would like to go first? Because I'm assuming this audience, whilst I still contend FinCom is pretty interesting, is
very interesting.
Yeah.
I'll introduce myself. Luke Tedeschi. I am a year-round resident. I have a family here. I have kids in the school. I have a home here. I also have a business downtown, and I own and operate the Tavern and the Gazebo, and have for, this will be my 28th consecutive year.
Wow.
I'm not only here to speak of myself and my business, but all the businesses downtown, all the restaurants, the inns, the hotels, anyone that is taking on deliveries. Arguably, I have the largest downtown establishment, so I see deliveries every single day of the week. But first of all, the article that is in has not been amended. So there is a lot more that was in that article, which I'm sure everyone has read, that is more than what's been spoken of today. I still am hearing we're here for the problem. Well, as far as I know, there isn't a problem. There's been a problem presented to us that now we're addressing. And so when Grant has said that we have met and had these great meetings, well, I was at the first meeting. Great. I was, I don't know that I'd call it great. I spoke my mind, and they shared where their concerns were. But this is a ball that was put into our court that we're now playing. There are a plethora of problems that their presentation has brought to this. That, firstly, we're a destination resort island, and we're here to serve this. What we are is a community of service, and we heavily rely, obviously, to put food on the table, made beds, you know, everything from coffee to ice cream to the essentials of why we have such a profitable and thriving tourist industry. And to throw something as that, now we don't want trucks downtown in certain time periods because it's too much traffic. Well, that is putting the cart a half a mile in front of the horse. We have to serve these people. Every single one of us that has a license has been granted from the town. So suddenly we have licenses to conduct business, and now someone wants to come in and try to restrict how we run our businesses. That's a problem. The issues that did come up in one of these meetings, you know, the infrastructure downtown was never thought of, forecasted, created for how much volume it sees now. You know, because I'm in the front line on Strait Wharf, where the High Line now has a boat every hour and 15 minutes. That's traffic. That's foot traffic. That's 10,000 kitty cops telling people which way to walk. That is every taxi, ride share, family member, other guests coming downtown. These trucks that are coming in to service and deliver to our establishments, they don't want to be there. They're there because it's also part of their job. Once they park, they're parked servicing as quickly and as efficiently as possible. They're not joyriding, waving at the tourists. And that is part of what the article, to my understanding, that I've read in my limited capacity of thinking, is suggesting. That's not where the problem lies. You know, I also looked up on town bylaws that a person that is coming to pick up or drop off somebody at the boat, either boat, any boat, has the right, and I think it's limited to 5 minutes, to stop, open their doors, greet, say goodbye, kisses, unload luggage, and that is on our bylaws, okay? So we're talking about what stops traffic, what blocks traffic. Well, if you don't like it, try an island where it's not as busy. We've created this, okay? And we're servicing it the best we can. And if you want to call it a problem, us that have businesses and that receive deliveries somehow have managed, I guess I've only been doing this 27 years, so I won't count this year. I've made it. I think, I won't say what I think. This creates, you know, there's driver seat time in all these trucks. Their seat time is limited. They have to compensate for what's on the boat. I heard Nat Lowell's name come up. Spoke with him a little yesterday. Everybody, this is a hot topic right now. And what's being presented, or lack of what's being presented, is us all scratching our heads saying, okay, this is part of downtown. This is part of our 3-month window. This is our opportunity to do business. And we're coming in with some type of opposition that, this is like, you really shouldn't poke the hornet's nest. Well, it's not a simple fix, but it's also not a simple problem. And I still am yet to identify what the real problem is. But to come in and now, okay, so if we're going to do something about loading zones, now you're talking about dealing with more enforcement. You're talking about more calls because the person that's, if they want to try to do this early or late, the people that have paid money to stay in lodging, are they going to be woken early, which is going to cause more causes to enforcement or police? The fact that has come up about bringing trucks in early, well, you're not going to have staff there. One, for anyone that has a liquor license that enforces it, you're not even supposed to have anyone in your building besides doing maintenance or cleaning in those hours that are suggested that you'd be taking deliveries on. So now we got a whole nother problem. What are we going to do with liquor license holders that say, wait, the town has to enforce this. The town has also issued me that license and now says, okay, your delivery is going to come at 5 a.m., but guess what? You can't have anyone in your building. Anyone think if anything as far down the road as that? I don't think so. In short, I think that there are many other factors besides deliveries. Now, another one I wanted to touch on. Trash removal. I get my trash removed twice a day. But if a truck can't come down to my establishment after 3 p.m., straight wharf, everybody gets all of their trash picked up. In fact, happens to be Miles Reese, they all come down, still dock, to the back end of my restaurant and do the entire straight wharf, which takes probably 30 minutes 2 times a day. Are we going to restrict that? That's trucking. That's taking up truck space that is past the, I think they put in a 20 or 15 foot truck length. Well, so, we're going to make precedents for that. In short, this is brought where there's not a whole lot of us that are here today that have businesses, restaurants or not, that are here to speak of it. But I don't know if it was going to try to be slid in under the radar when no one's paying attention, but thankfully there's a few of us here. And hopefully I'm speaking for all of those people. And one other thing that, and please stand if there is anyone here, but I heard a lot of chatter about, we've spoken to delivery companies and gotten their feed on that. Is anyone here in the trucking or transportation to oppose or comment? So I find that that's, you can say whatever you want. Oh, we've spoken to these people. Well, I think that I have spoken to, especially throw Nat Lowe under the bus again, but because he has his ear to the ground, I've had discussion with him. I have talked with U.S. Foods. That's not exactly the case that they're all on board with this type of thing. They can't do it. There's trucking unions. There's weather. There's a steamship. Do you want to come to my restaurant and read the menu? And I'm saying, I'm sorry, I couldn't get that here because the truck couldn't make it here by 3 p.m. Does a tourist that just spent all this money to come to Nantucket want to hear that? And I'll back up. This town issued you my license to serve. And now I'm going to be having to worry about if I can even get product to serve to my customers? Tourist doesn't want to hear that.
Luke, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughtful comments. Who would like to be next, please?
Thank you. My name is Rick Bodette, and I represent Nantucket Island Resorts. They did ask me to come here today in the interest of full disclosure. They did not ask me to speak, however. So if I can, I did want you to know that, but if I can take my lawyer hat off for a moment, I will say that I have had a big issue with this article since the day I saw it. And I've lived here 17 years, and I have never once voiced my displeasure on an article. And I've done that for a reason, because I don't want to be one of these guys that speaks on every article. I want it to matter when I do speak. So I think some of the initial concerns I had with this article is, and I think, you know, Joe really took the words right out of my mouth. What is the problem? And a second question is, who does this benefit? Who is this for? Certainly doesn't benefit any of the restaurateurs here or business owners. Doesn't benefit me, and I've been driving downtown to work for 17 years. You know, I go down every day, summer, spring, fall, and winter. And if there's traffic, then I wait. I go around. In the summer, I ride my bike to work. When I need to go to the building department, I ride my bike there. I put something in a backpack, I copy something, put it in a backpack, come back to work. It's that simple. So I didn't really hear an answer to what the problem is. And so it just kind of dawned on me sitting here that, you know, maybe I was initially a little too angry at the article, because it kind of dawned on me that this is how maybe Act Now gets to the table, is they propose an article, and now I think, is it Julia? Julia has mentioned that it's created all this discussion, and I think that might be pretty cool. If their purpose was to get to the table, to have discussions with people, then I applaud that. If the purpose is to restrict businesses downtown from deliveries, then that's not something I can ever support. I don't think you guys should ever support that. You know, specifically on the article, I mean, a couple of the problems are, you know, again, I think it sounds like it is going to be amended, but just initially as it stands right now, a delivery between 5 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. is impossible during the summer months. The noise bylaw prohibits it. So they want to create a pilot program to study these deliveries, but the deliveries aren't even, and they want to limit the deliveries to a certain time. The deliveries aren't even allowed to happen based on the noise bylaw in place during that time that they've set. So I think it will create some chaos downtown, really, I think, during the 8 to 10 window, which is realistically the only time. If people are limited to 5 a.m. to 10 a.m., then really 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. are the only times that people can deliver. And I think that's going to create chaos downtown during those 2 hours. And I think you're going to have enforcement issues. It's going to cost money. And the other question I had, you know, that maybe you guys should ask, and maybe it's already been asked and answered, is who pays for the pilot program? I mean, there's an article before you that asks the town to direct the selectmen to put in place a pilot program to study traffic. And that sounds fine, but it sounds to me like the town needs to pay for that if they put it in place. If the select board puts in place the pilot program that they're asking for, they're asking the town to vote for, it sounds like we all have to pay for that. So
Rick, I believe Act Now will actually pay for the pilot
Okay.
program. That was in an earlier discussion
Great,
in
thank you.
December. So
Great.
just, yeah.
Thank you very much.
But I agree that that is some of the issue. Like, why does the select board need to direct it at all? Why can't they just do a study on their own and pay for it? So that's just, I wasn't quite sure why they needed to do that.
Right. So, and the answer may be that that's how they get to the table to talk about it. And I think, you know, that these discussions could be good. If different loading zones are going to happen downtown and something becomes more efficient, then great. But again, it's not a problem for me. And so I don't know who this helps. I guess based on the hours that are set in the article, it looks like it's put in place to help the summer person who's sitting in traffic on their way to go shopping between 10 and 3. I mean, that's, to me, it looks like that's what the solution to the problem is. I don't know. I mean, maybe they can ride a bike like me, but I don't have a problem with it. And I think it's great downtown. And so I did want to speak about it. And I think Luke touched on something really important as well. I mean, I see a lot of restaurateurs here and business people, but I think, quite honestly, and I don't think it's intentional on Act Now's part, it's just the process, but I think they are underrepresented here. This is the month that everybody runs to warmer weather, and they work 11 months out of the year and they get out of here, especially the business owners downtown who don't have kids. I mean, they're gone. So I think if you had this meeting in May, this room would be packed. So anyway, I don't think you should be in favor of this article, and I'd ask you to vote against it.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Who else would like to speak, please? Yes, please.
Jamie Holmes. I'm the general manager at the Nantucket Hotel, but I also represent 37 of the island businesses, the inns on island, as the chairman of the Lodging Association. And I can tell you our group is very, very much upset and afraid that the people are going to go to town meeting and vote on something that they don't really understand how it's going to impact business. So we have a lot of our businesses downtown have understandings with Reese and with Santos and with all the trucking companies that you can come at certain times because it's good business. The other day we had Reese changed a truck driver, and they came at 7:30 in the morning to pick up the trash and backed up with the backup beeper going, and it cost us money. In the hotel business, anybody who's not happy, it costs you money. But we've been able to make it work. I've only been here for 8 years. I'm not as long as Luke, but I have observed that in the middle of the summer, I can get to the airport in 15 minutes. And a bad traffic jam is 5 cars ahead of me before the stop sign. So everybody knows that it's inconvenient traffic in the summer, but I think sometimes it's blown out of proportion. So we don't think that we want to get deliveries at 5 o'clock. We don't allow any of our trucks to come before 8 o'clock, and most of them, we don't allow them to come before 9 o'clock. And so that wouldn't help. Additionally, the trucks would probably have to deliver their trucks at night and then have someone else drive them in the morning, because there isn't any boats coming at 5 o'clock in the morning to offload, and the trucks are coming from off island because we don't have transfer stations here, so they don't bring everything over and then redistribute it. So we'd be very concerned about that. When we discussed it, we also said if you try to compress the times, then it would cause those times to be more congested. So compressing isn't the idea. I think letting all the different trucking companies, I'm sure Cisco and US Foods and all the other ones, they get together and figure out how they can not all be at the same restaurant at the same time. If they all go to Luke's place at one time, they can't deliver anyway because they can't get there. So over the years, they've figured it out. So the Nantucket Hotel believes that a good idea would be to test it for a year and get real data. On the other hand, the group that's suggesting it, taking the data, seems not that independent of a survey, but obviously they could hire someone else who's completely independent of them. But we don't think anything's wrong with being more efficient. We don't think anything's wrong with studying traffic patterns and trying to make it fit. I haven't figured out how all the cars are going to get down Old South Road when all the houses are built, but we're not trying to solve that problem here. So Lodging Association and Nantucket Hotel don't think this amendment is written in a way that's going to benefit our constituency. Thank you.
Jamie. Other comments, please? Okay, so thank you everyone for your comments.
Wait, I think Orla's going to talk.
Orla. That's okay.
Orla Lascola, I'm from the proprietors. I understand that these guys believe that there is an issue. It would have been nice to know as a restaurant owner that they perceived there to be an issue and had conversation before this article went forward. I feel like we often, as restaurant owners, get thrust into positions where we're backtracking because we didn't know that things were an issue. And this is one of those times.
Okay.
So like we've had a lot of meetings that there's been, I haven't heard one restaurant owner who's in support of this. And I think I've pretty much spoken to everybody.
Okay.
So if that's any help to how you vote, I don't think any of us are in favor of this.
Okay.
Thank you, Orla.
Thanks, Orla.
Yes, Grant?
I just want to clear up a few things. I haven't heard any restaurant owners who are in favor of this either, as it's written. We want to amend it. We want to make it better. The whole reason for doing this is so that we can get our hands around the problem, to understand what the problem is. And I've heard a few people say that they don't know what the problem is or what is the problem. And I'll tell you exactly what the problem is. We have 32,000 registered vehicles on this island in the summer, and we can't all use the roadway at the same time. We just can't. And I know this firsthand because this summer I rode my bike in and out of town over 100 times. I was working downtown. I live in the Mid-Island. I biked in and out, and I saw firsthand, a delivery vehicle straddling a bike lane and a pedestrian lane in order to make its deliveries and backing up traffic, all the way down Washington Street as a result. I have pictures on my phone of a delivery vehicle straddling 2 handicap spots in front of the Dreamland, waiting for the loading zone to open up. So those are 2 small isolated problems, but over the course of the summer, I saw a number of situations where I have to believe that if we study this problem, smart people can come up with a solution. So I personally do not want to make anyone's job harder. Okay, my wife grew up in the restaurant business, and I know for a fact that if anyone parked in front of Henry's, Henry would come out in his apron, and he would, if it was me or if they worked for the sandwich shop, he would shoo them away. He cared about whether there was space for deliveries and also space for customers. And that's all we're talking about here is getting a pilot program together that allows us to make a smart decision. Thanks.
Go ahead, Jill.
I mean, Grant, the thing is, for me, is you're picking on one aspect of traffic and congestion problem. This is not a trees problem, it's a forest problem. So I don't understand why you're addressing it in that way. Why would you pick on the large trucks, which, by the way, we have to have? We don't have to have maybe other cars that everybody wants to have. So, and I'm not saying we should do that either, but you're picking on one aspect of a huge, huge issue. And I just wondered why you picked on that one, the one that we have to have.
Okay. First of all, nobody's picking on anyone. All right. We study traffic all the time, but commercial deliveries are the types of downtown traffic that we have control over. The police can get together and decide where the loading zones are going to be and how it's going to move. Also, commercial deliveries are the easiest ones to track because they come off the boat, they go around town, they get back on the boat, so they're easier to transpond. We can't transpond the entire island with...
That isn't even entirely true, Grant. The Miles Reese, his trucks are here. They're not leaving. I mean, that was an excellent point about the trash. I hadn't even thought about that.
Right.
But my word.
And they arrive early in the morning. They aren't even part of the problem, the trash trucks. So
I'm sure they have more than one pickup a day.
Anyway, like I said, we don't want to pick on anyone. What we want to do is study the problem.
I just don't know what the problem is. I'm sorry. The problem is
I've
a
gotta
huge,
say
large
that-
thing.
I've got to say that being in the food service business for 15 years here, running trucks in and out, running trucks to the mainland, I think it's very, very important that before you form any ideas, before we see any articles, before town meeting sees any articles, is you need to take quite a while, at least one full season, analyzing what is going on, not just with delivery trucks, not just with trash trucks, but with cars. And by taking into account everything, I mean the number of seats in a restaurant, the number of parking spaces available. How much is the steamship going to be able to accommodate? This to me is a totally frivolous exercise in front of this board, in front of town meeting, because you're coming at it half-cocked. And I have no other way to, to describe it. So I think you should just sort of fade away on this personally and get your act together, because it's an insult to everybody that works in the industry, whether it's in the restaurant, in the delivery business, being a taxi driver. I mean, you're way, way, way out of the mark.
I mean, just ask a question. Do you think that it's way out of the mark? I think I heard you say earlier that studying is more important than maybe imposing hours at this point.
I think your comprehension needs to be upgraded. I don't think you have any idea of what's actually happening in the downtown, whether it's got to do with food delivery, passenger delivery, people coming off the boat. There are ways to quantify this, and if you are really interested in addressing it, put a study together that has people in it that know what's going on, and somebody can quantify it. But this is nowhere near that.
Well, it's a piece of that. I would hope that it would be a piece of that. If we struck
it needs to be a bigger piece than this.
I absolutely agree.
And I mean, I said I'm not in favor of proceeding at all.
That's clear. Okay, so yes, please.
I just want to make one point. Amy Young from The Beat. There was a small group of us about a week and a half ago that sat with Julia and Grant, and that was the request from everyone in that group, was that they pull the article for this year and do the study.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one request that we all had. So I would just make that request again now. Clear. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy.
Can I add just one thing? I think Act Now is a noble concept, and I think that in the long run it'll be great. I think that you decided that you wanted to set a stamp by presenting 2 articles, which you did. But you created the problem that really wasn't there, I think, in both cases. And I don't think that's the answer. I think you guys, like I said, it's noble what you're trying to do, but I think you really need to study and come up with something that makes sense and that's concrete and that is a problem before we try to solve something that isn't a problem. And just my own opinion.
Thank you. Any other comments from FinCom? Any other comments from the audience? I mean, just to summarize a little bit, thank you everybody for your input. And to Luke's earlier point, I think all the articles that come before town meeting, we do actually spend quite a lot of time. I mean, FinCom tonight, this is about 2,000% more than we ever have in the audience. So I'm taking it as a personal win. I hope Julia comes every week, just because then that way we'll have all of you people here with us. So thank you, Act Now, just for that. The point is we do take these very seriously. We look at them from an economic, not only what financial impact will it have on the town, but the economics of it will have on the citizens of the town. So if you're running a business and those kind of things, we do take that into consideration for our deliberations. So just to, if it's any assurance to the people who made the time to be here today, we do take this very seriously, and we do try to consider all the points and give them all a fair hearing, and so that we can get to something that benefits Nantucket and benefits all of us in an appropriate way. So thank you all for being here. It was very interesting. I've made tons of notes. We won't rule on it tonight. We'll add it to our deliberations in the future in terms of a ruling, because I think, I believe Julia and Grant may come back to us with some amendments, in which case I'd prefer to rule once on the amendments than to rule now and then have to rule again if it gets changed.
Can I ask how that actually works? Because they're going to come with an amendment that they will propose to town meeting that would need to be adopted at town meeting?
So,
and so how does that impact on our deliberations?
I surely wish you hadn't asked me that, Chris. So my understanding, and Andrew Vorse probably know, or Leslie probably knows it better than I do. So Leslie, could you stand up and save me?
Sorry, I didn't mean
That's
to be
okay.
on
No,
the
that's
spot,
okay. Because I've been asking the same
I've
question.
just been
Yeah.
Okay, so with citizen petitions or with articles sponsored by the select board, the FinCom can consider modifications to the article, and then you can include that in your motion.
That's what I thought.
So Act Now or anyone else can come forward with some additional proposal, and as long as it's within the scope of the article as presented, then that's what you can include in your motion.
Yeah, so we could do, for example, we can do a motion that then says, we motion to adopt under the circumstances that this, and this happens.
Who
As an example.
determines the scope?
Moderator.
The moderator.
Only.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure, so I'm always happy to have someone who knows more than I stand up and clarify things. Perfect, thank you. Okay, with that, we will move on to planning. I'm watching the whole audience leave us.
Look at you.
Denise, I need to leave in about 10 minutes. Just
Okay, okay, oh, you too? You too, A2 Brutus?
First time.
A2 Brutus?
You can't leave. We only have 5 people.
No, once we have a quorum.
We're not going to vote tonight on anything, though, right?
Once we have a quorum,
Okay.
we can be less than a quorum to do votes.
Yeah, no,
Oh, really?
You
Oh,
still
interesting.
have 6. No, I know. And even if you had 5, it's still 4.
No, but Denise still vote.
I was here last night with like 2 others.
Okay,
I feel you have 5 plus.
hi, Andrew.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thank you
Great.
for being here. And thank you for sending us the preliminary planning recommendations.
You're welcome.
So folks, we're on Article 39, right?
Right.
We'll start right with the first one you sent us.
Okay, yeah, so I can go through the zoning, which there's basically 23 articles, 14 submitted by the planning board, 9 submitted by citizens, and then we have Article 63, which we can have a conversation about. So Article 39 is, I think you all who have been on the board know that I've been talking for the last 12, 15 years about phasing out the RC2 zoning district, which is a district that allows everything from a single-family home to an asphalt plant. It allows 40 feet of frontage, 50% ground cover. It's really a non-zoning district. And this year, there's a patch left in the Bartlett Appleton Road. So Article 39 rezones 3 properties from their current RC2 designation to R5, which is the residential equivalent of RC2 at a slightly lower and more reasonable standard. The planning board has closed the hearing on this, unanimously recommended it.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think so. No.
Do we want to rule on these as we go, or do we want to, what's the appetite of the FinCom? I mean,
The controversial. Knock them off. Yeah.
Yes.
okay, perfect. So,
Well, or I suppose we could go through them all and then just do them as a group.
we could do them one by one quickly. I think it's better, just in case. So, can I get a motion on this, please?
Rule on Article 39?
No, I mean, I need the actual motion.
Move to adopt.
Thank you.
No, move to support the planning board's motion. That's what we do.
Yes.
Yes.
I need a second.
Second.
What, sorry, Chris, were you going to say?
No, I just have a question. It can be in discussion. Well, I guess it shouldn't be in discussion after. Can you note if is this creating a lot of non-conforming properties?
In this case, no.
Okay, thank you. And as you go through, can you just
Flag those, sure.
Flag those things.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, so there's a motion to adopt the planning board recommendation. There's a second. Any further discussion on the motion? No? May I have a vote? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay.
Article 40 is the same basic principle, and this time we're at the corner of Bartlett Road and Surfside Road. So again, we've drawn the lines to cover where there's residential properties. This is going from RC2, a commercial zone, to a residential zone, R5. I don't know if I think there may be a few 40-foot wide lots in this group, but generally all conforming as to use. And unanimous on the planning board, no neighborhood opposition to this article.
Thank you.
Sorry, move to support the planning board's motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're moving to, again, the same basic principle to near the corner of Myacomet Ave and Surfside. There is a mixture here of some commercial properties. This is a mixed area of some residential and some commercial. So it's difficult not to include some commercial properties that are interspersed among the residences. So during our public hearing, we did remove 2 properties that are closest to Surfside Road and Myacomet for future study. We've had discussions with the rest of the group here, and the planning board recommends this unanimously as well.
Any
Move to
discussion?
support the planning board's motion.
Second?
Now we can discuss.
Any discussion of the motion?
Yeah, sorry, I am just catching up here.
I think you're on.
Not on the right one.
No, we're on 41.
I'm really catching up. Oh, I already voted for the one I had a question on, so no further discussion from me. Thanks.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you.
So we don't have to ask if anyone that we go through there is some controversy, can you just point that out?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Article 42.
Article 42, so now we're back at the corner of Bartlett and Surfside again. So in the earlier article, I guess it was 40, we sorted out the residential group. So this group is in the commercial group. So these properties would go to the commercial neighborhood designation. So if you look at the map, commercial neighborhood already exists in this area, and that's the area colored green. So again, there was no controversy. There probably were discussions with different parties on this. Is that fair to say?
There were some that were in the residential article that wanted to move into this one, so we moved things around.
Yep. And this has the unanimous support of the planning board as well.
Thank you. Any discussion from the group?
I motion to support.
Just make the point, I don't think I have the maps. Did I miss the
I didn't
maps?
have the maps either.
Leslie sent us the maps via email this afternoon. So
I have planning
I
board recommendation.
believe I forwarded them
Gotcha,
to you.
okay, yep.
I think I forwarded them.
No. Well, I got them. I don't know if everybody else got them. I see.
I think I got it.
Yeah.
No maps.
I think Denise, maybe you need to send them to everybody. I'm not sure I can do that.
Okay, I thought I did, but I could be wrong. Here we go. I didn't forward them? Oops. Oops. Okay, I'll forward them right this minute. Stephen, you have them. So Joe, Joe,
This one is 43,
George,
no, 42.
Peter.
42.
Peter. Sorry, guys, I thought I did forward them. It was one of those days. Boom.
Now, leave it in the middle, which is all.
Come on.
Frank Garnett's
Send.
over there.
All right,
Yeah, I got it.
there we go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what, motion to support?
On 42, yes.
42?
Okay. Oh, any further discussion?
This is 42, yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
Compare it to this one. This one moved things to residential, this moves into commercial.
Click back one more, please.
Isn't
It's a chunk of hair as well.
the section we're looking at is, we actually covered it in 40. It's the properties on Boynton Lane that were moved from RC2 to R5.
Yes?
Closest to Surfside.
Are those currently residential uses?
Duplexes.
Okay, so those will remain residential and will be conforming in R5.
Correct.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, 42. I'll take the vote again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope, okay. All right,
Article 43, so we're back at Bartlett and Appleton Road. So this is the remaining pocket there, which would go from RC2 to commercial tech. That stands for trade, entrepreneur, and craft. So it's designed to be a basically home-based type business. That's a mixed area. I think if you've been down Perry Lane lately, you see that's quite a mixed area. And predominantly these properties are commercial.
any discussion? Jill, have you visited it? Because you're our local.
I tend to know most of the roads, but I did not drive by Perry Lane recently.
Okay. Motion?
Motion to support the planning board?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Warrant Article 44. So the board had an initial discussion on this article, but we have re-advertised this, so we do not have a final recommendation on this until, February 10th, I believe, is our...
That's what it says on here.
For
February
44?
10th. Yep.
So,
Okay, and then
Article 45.
you're going to do it
It's like,
yesterday.
this is all Young's, or sorry, this is Young's Way. So it's this whole property, 21 Old South Road, plus this section.
Okay.
We ready on that? 45? So this is a pocket of leftover residential commercial that is down off of Washington Street, Union Street, Francis Street. Currently in a commercial zone. So this would transition from its current residential commercial to commercial neighborhood. There's two properties that were removed here for further study. The house on the corner of Francis and Washington. The property owners wanted to consider the ROH option as a possibility and further investigate what CN would mean for them, and Sale Seafood at the other end of Washington Street. They're in the middle of basically enclosing one of their freezers and would be affected by the change.
Okay.
So those two properties are out. The rest of the area is in for commercial neighborhood. So it's going from commercial to commercial, just a lower intensity than the RC.
Okay,
These are those apartments.
any
That would be
questions?
allowed in CN.
Oh, and this, I'm sorry, has,
They are, but CN allows.
there is no opposition to that other than the two that we've talked about, and has unanimous support of the planning board.
Thank you.
So the few single-family residences would just be pre-existing non-conforming.
Grandfather, correct?
And they didn't raise any issue with it?
No. The properties can continue in that use, or they can switch to other uses, so.
Motion? May I
Motion
have-
to support the planning boards.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Article 46 takes us out to Sconset. And the proposal here is, this is the area that basically is the east side of Broadway down and including Codfish Park.
Yep.
I think a lot of people were surprised to, I guess, learn that the ROH district, residential old historic district, divided on Broadway. So basically the west side was in ROH and the east side was in something else, which is SR1. So this change unites that entire area. It's the same basic lot size. There's a few differences in terms of the ground cover is higher in the ROH district, but that actually conforms to the existing pattern that's there. This is one of the few areas, at least between Front and Broadway, that already meets the 50% ground cover. So these properties are all conforming to that. One concern is that others, not people in this area, but this does remove the possibility of pools, and we just heard support for that basic concept in this location. So we have no opposition to this, and this is unanimously recommended as well.
Any questions or
So
comments?
right now, the people in those lots, they could put pools in?
The SR1s are eligible for pools. The SOH are not.
I would just add to that that there are very few properties in that location that could support a pool.
Yeah,
But
that's what I
anyways,
was
they're mostly built out right now.
The one owner that could said he didn't want one.
Right.
So
Any other questions?
Yeah, really.
Move to support the planning board's motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And my very first house on Nantucket was 8 Broadway.
Oh.
I didn't know we weren't in the cool district.
Right.
Look at that.
You still probably
And we surely
overpaid,
had no room
Denise.
for a pool. We barely had room for our suitcases.
Warrant Article 47. So this is a planning board sponsored article R20 to R40. So this particular article came out of, I guess, a discussion by this neighborhood for its future when a proposal came forward that divided one of the lots. The R20 district has been in place here for, I guess, since 1974. There were some private deed restrictions that expired here. And at the time, the board got feedback from the neighbors that, or some of the neighbors that were attending, that they wanted to rezone this particular neighborhood from its R20 status to R40. So we had several meetings. We had a very long discussion about this last night. And the board's motion is to take no action on this after numerous people filed pre-plans to lock in certain rights and other things. So the board felt that it was kind of driving a bunch of further division that maybe wasn't necessary, and basically wants to pass on this particular article. So it still possibly could come up at town meeting for further discussion, but there was really no unified position by anybody in here on what they really wanted to do.
Okay.
So when you say pass, you're saying the planning board did not support changing the zoning from R20 to R40?
Correct. Their motion was to take no action, and then there is a comment. Do you want me to read that?
Please.
The planning board presented this article based on comments received by property owners during a public hearing for a proposed special permit that resulted in the creation of one additional lot between Bayberry Lane and Rugged Road. At the time, property owners suggested they would prefer to maintain the low-density character of the neighborhood rather than take advantage of additional ground cover and lot division potential available in the R20 district. Subsequently, other property owners filed preliminary plans or special permit applications to divide their property, and one owner has requested to be removed if the article moves forward. Upon additional consideration, the board determined that rezoning this neighborhood would not have the result anticipated when the article was drafted and would now create zoning nonconformities where they do not currently exist.
So a practical question, so this is a neighborhood, R20 is half-acre zoning?
Half acre.
And there are existing properties? So how do you take a neighborhood that's existing half-acre and make it acre?
Because most of the existing lots are substantially oversized.
Okay.
Yeah, they range from about 38,000 to as high as 65,000.
But not to an acre. None of them reach an acre.
Yeah, most of them are. There's one that's not. A builder's acre, 40,000
Yeah.
square feet.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry,
40,000
I was
is,
doing
yeah,
the
the minimum.
80,000 square feet.
43,
And if you go to 40,
560.
that takes away people's
There's a
ability
builder's
to...
acre? Is that like a
40,000.
biker's dozen?
Yeah, really, what is a builder's acre?
It's
I thought an acre
40,000.
was an acre.
Like
a
log,
mile
like
is a
log
mile.
1 is 40,000.
It just shows
Log
you I
2,
do not know.
80,000 square feet minimum.
It's just our interpretation.
It's just easier math. Math's hard.
Guess I never knew what an acre was. Okay, so, based on that explanation,
Nantucket
any other
acre is a little
questions?
different.
I just learned that.
38,000.
So, do we have a motion? So if the planning board said take no action,
Let's take no action. No, let's support their motion.
Okay, do I have a motion for that?
That's my motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Okay, the
I can't
next
leave during this whole thing.
article is not a map article. This is a
I know.
swimming pool article. The board had an extensive discussion about the issue of swimming pools and debated several different approaches. The approach that they settled on was,
Okay. Jill's recusing herself, she has to step away from the table.
okay.
Do you have enough people? Pardon? Yeah, you're fine. Yeah. As long as we started with a quorum, it doesn't matter what we end up with. Everybody else recuse yourself, I'm sticking to it. Okay, back to our story.
So the board decided to, I guess, after much discussion, settled on an approach which is to adopt a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet in basically the R1, the SR1, R5, and R5 Limited, which hasn't been mapped yet, but basically these are the districts closest to the existing ROH district that require a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. So you have to have 150% of the minimum lot size in order to have a pool, and also the setback would be increased from the current 5 to 10 feet. We did a calculation, I think it affects, do you remember roughly, it was
It's a significant amount.
a significant amount of existing properties, and then properties that might otherwise be subdivided. There might have to be a choice there would have to be some consideration. If you wanted a pool, say you had a 10,000 square foot lot, it would be a choice between a pool or a subdivision in a situation like that.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Where currently would this be violated if we had this in, like on Wynn up there, would that be?
So generally the area that's seen a lot of development is up by the cliff area, which has been in the R1 district for quite some time and has seen a lot of redivision of property up there. The SR1 district exists on the fringes of Sconset, away from the old historic. So I think you know that the old historic districts basically outlawed pools probably 6 years ago, maybe. Is it 12? Yeah. I think so. Okay, so 8 years ago, thank you. So they're outlawed in the old historic district, and again, this is what the board decided after there were different proposals on this. The original proposal was 10,000 square feet, and then the board, after quite a bit of discussion, decided on 7,500. So in the end, it was, I believe this is unanimously supported. Julia says yes. So I think that's correct, that it was unanimously recommended.
And who would oppose this?
I think, well, certainly there are people who have asked the question, what's wrong with pools? There are people who like pools and want them and don't think that they're problematic.
Okay.
There are, I guess, certain property owners that want to maintain the right to have one that would be upset about losing it. I'm trying to think of other tests.
There's certainly a whole employment sector involved with the installation and maintenance of pools and the landscaping and the, other amenities.
Does this, can you quantify, I mean, if prior to this change, potentially, 500 pools could have been built and now only 200 pools can build, or is it a big, or is it like it used to be 200, now it's 175,
I mean, we have the information on the lot sizes, but I don't have the lot by lot ground cover. So, if the lot's built out, there may not be room for a pool, even though it doesn't technically count towards ground cover. So I don't have it down to that level of detail, but I could tell you just based on the lot sizes. which I don't have with me right now. But I can tell you it affects a lot more lots in R1 than it does in R5.
Maybe, excuse me, maybe I missed at the top. So what's the why here? Why is this here?
I think you're aware that there's been a pretty open debate about the issue of pools. There are certainly those who don't think they're necessary, don't think that they belong. There was certainly a survey of the ROH and SOH areas where the overwhelming majority of people did not want them, which is why that change was made. There was an article at last year's town meeting that was much broader and affected many more properties.
And that was all the debate about they're noisy or something, people don't like them because they.
I
No,
think,
that was the same article. That was the idea behind it.
right,
It was
and
Fritz's article.
there was thought then to modify that article, but because of, those can be very confusing, and you move forward with one article and then changed it.
I'm confused, so.
So
that's fair.
So this article was brought forward, with this basic focus from the start this year.
Okay.
So,
So is this I'm asking you to speculate here, it's probably not fair, but is it a creeping phenomenon of anti-poolness? So we're gonna come back with other districts next year? I'm not too familiar with this debate, I'll tell you.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we are.
Yeah, okay.
People seem to have strong opinions about pools, and some for, some against. I don't know. I mean, zoning articles have a high threshold, a 2/3 majority.
Mm-hmm.
I will say in Nantucket, they made changes to their allowance for pools. So you have to have minimum size lot of 20,000 in that area, and it's a special permit. So.
Can we come back to this one? Just,
Yes.
I'm not saying I'm
Yep, no,
against
that's
it or
fine.
the planning board, I just
That's
would
fine.
love to get a little
Yep.
smarter on
No,
the
we
issue.
can come back to this one. So we'll go to 49, please, Andrew.
Just pools.
Just pools.
Yes, the spas would. Right.
Come back, Jules, all's forgiven.
Would hot tubs have anything to do with pools? I mean, they're above ground, they're small. I mean, is that ever in the same zoning
Depends how you define it.
concern?
They're defined by the amount of water, and the spas are generally under, they're.
We're talking about the ones that are in the ground?
In the ground, yeah.
Which is really a pool, part of a pool in many cases.
No, my new neighbor put a hot tub in that's just a hot tub on their property, and it's in the ground. Yep.
So.
It's about the amount of water, like Andrew said.
That's right.
It's the amount of gallons and or the surface area.
So was there contention about this at your public hearing?
Not from the public, no.
Was it unanimous?
It was.
I mean, it's a small lot, my gosh. You're gonna be swimming in that when you're in your house.
Less tomorrow, less leaf flow. No leaf flow in there. Okay, moving on. Okay, 49.
49 is dealing with certain sheds in the R5 and R10, and it relaxes the setback. I forget kind of the.
Sheds of 50 square feet or less, it gives them some, additional setback.
The kind that are generally sort of up against the property without windows and extensive,
Yep.
And again,
That's small.
You've got a lawnmower in it, basically.
to neaten up the areas, and this was unanimously supported.
Okay,
Motion to support.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Article 50 has to do with driveways and curb cuts, mainly in the Sconset Old Historic District. We've not had our hearing on this yet. Basically, this just, I guess the main point here is it introduces that there must be a COA from the Historic District Commission before the DPW approves curb cuts to make sure everything is properly aligned.
Where did that come from, can I ask?
Where did that
The
come
article come from?
I know that there was a lot of discussion between the Historical Commission on this
Okay.
and the DPW director. He had originally suggested the Historical Commission have a role here, but with the HDC already reviewing hardscape and everything,
Right.
we thought it's best to just make sure that the sequence is aligned as opposed to introducing a new review.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Okay.
51.
51 is it's a reordering and clarification of our existing demolition delay bylaw.
Okay.
What that is, so if a structure that has already been approved by the HDC to be demolished or removed, typically this is like a ranch house or something that's not architecturally significant, it gives a chance for parties to look at that for reuse for affordable housing. So there's not really any substantive changes, it's just aligning, I think, the process to make sure it's advertised correctly and some minor, I guess, yeah, it's really a housekeeping type article.
Okay.
But it keeps it intact, and it's something that we obviously support.
And it's no contradiction to 62.
62 has, I'd like to.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm just making sure
What's
that
that?
this one doesn't, this one doesn't, this one, it isn't,
No, it doesn't.
Okay, that's
It's
all, I was just
already in
checking.
there, and
Okay,
Delay 2 years?
Well, it could be this confusing for people to,
hence my question.
yeah, well, 2 demolition articles right there.
Okay, so, was this majority, everyone was in favor?
majority, yes.
Okay, and was there any opposition from
No.
anyone?
Nope.
Okay. Any questions from us? No? May I have a
Support? Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Article 52 is a technical amendment, and Leslie, I'm going to let you talk about this. This is your.
So I would actually clarify or classify this as housekeeping as well. In section 1, there are some definition changes to inclusionary unit. There was just a bad reference in the bylaw. For landscape contractor, the definition did not explicitly provide for exterior storage. And if you're a landscape contractor, exterior storage is kind of part of the business. So that was leading to some confusion. So we're adding that in. Section 2, we have an overlay district section of the bylaw, and overlays have just been added and added and added in no particular order. So we're not proposing any changes to the districts, but just reordering them in the bylaw so that they make more sense. In section 3, that's adding in some language from state law so that our local bylaw is consistent with the statute. That basically says if you have a special permit and it's subject to an appeal, you can move forward at your own risk during the appeal. And then at number 4.
Is that something that you, I mean, that sounds like there could be more to that than, or would you expect to see a lot of that happen, or?
It happens occasionally with large projects where the appeal drags on and the person feels confident that they can at least start some of the work.
And they're allowed to.
I mean, as a practical matter on Nantucket, do you see this as becoming common practice, or? Just,
Not really, but it could.
I don't know, it just had that ring of when you, I mean, appeals and things are so dramatic sometimes here that it had the ring of something that could be more substantial than maybe, but go ahead.
I don't think that our bylaw was intentionally inconsistent with state law.
Okay,
I
fair
think
enough.
it was language that had just not been updated.
Okay, thank you.
And then number 4, the planning board has made it a practice to try to align zoning districts with property lines. In this particular property, the owner obtained a piece of the abutting property, which was in a different district. So if this is approved, the entire property would be in a single zoning district, R20.
And that map's in your packet.
Yep.
This was approved,
Unanimously.
and no controversy around this.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? No. Okay.
Okay, so now we're moving into the citizen articles, starting with 53.
Andrew, just 1 second.
Yep.
While we have Andrew and Leslie here, I just want to keep going and finish this with them. I realize that we normally stop at 6, but I would ask your indulgence to go until we finish everything, because we're lucky that they were able to come here on such short notice, and it'd be nice to wrap these up. Is that okay with everyone? Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
Great, thank you. So Article 53 is in your map grouping here. The proposal here is to change these 3 properties to the adjoining CTEC zoning district. So these are moving from residential to the commercial trade entrepreneur craft designation. This area used to be all zoned RC2, so it was all commercial. And the line that we drew at the time really reflected where the existing residential stopped. You can see that there is other, the CTEC is the purple area. And basically, one of the business owners is buying the larger lot that goes out to Marianne. You can see that kind of larger size lot. And the other 2 property owners asked to be included within that same designation. So this is an extension of the commercial designation there, and the board basically unanimously approved this. There was no
They didn't come
opposition.
through when you forwarded it.
There you go. Sorry, I'll move my computer down here so we can see them. Technology and I are not friends today. I'll sit in the middle and you can see them. How's that? Okay. Okay, so this one.
Yep.
Okay. Any discussion?
Motion to support?
Second.
Can you hang on a second? I don't even know what the motion is.
To move these 3 that are outlined into CTEC.
Into this district,
Make them
it's an
purple.
abutting district. He's buying his neighbor, yeah.
So the motion was to support the citizen article in this case?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was unanimous?
And that was unanimous.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Article 54, also a citizen article to change a property from R10 to commercial neighborhood on Cobble Court. This property is across from and 1 lot back from the high school and an existing commercial neighborhood district. The property owner has been in discussion with us for some time and discussed with the board this kind of area that's, you can see it's kind of surrounded by the CN. So you've got the hospital property on the west side.
Yeah, that's the high school.
Yep. And then the existing row of commercial neighborhood on the east side. So the board voted unanimously to recommend in favor of this article. And there wasn't any real
Any comment from the ones who are left there?
There was no written or oral testimony at the hearing.
Quiet.
Yep.
And he came to our public hearing as well.
Yeah, he did.
Initial one, he's-
Yeah, he did. He was at the first one.
Okay. And that was what's his name?
Carl.
Yeah.
I think the board found that this was a reasonable area. There were discussions of, there's some existing commercial activity there that's mixed in with the residences. That's low key, and
It shows a structure on the, there's a structure on the property now?
I believe it's a shed. It's not a significant building.
I think his comment was that it would change the density of the neighborhood, if I remember correctly, but I think somewhere made that note on my paper.
His first comment was, why am I here?
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
remember.
that's right. And then he just made that comment and didn't seem fussed about it one way or the other.
There's 2 roads
So,
here
okay,
and here.
so it was unanimous and no opposition.
Is Cobble Court a public road?
No, it's a private road.
Okay. a motion?
Motion to support?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Article 55, citizen article as well. This article proposes to change property, I guess, on the northern side of Pulpus Road across from the Island Lumber property. The proposal here is to change it from its current designation VR, a residential zone, to village neighborhood, a commercial zone. Through the discussion with the abutters, it seems like the motivation is not that they become commercial, but that the ground cover be allowed to expand. At least that was the main topic. I think the board continued this matter, but found, I guess, said there were at least 3 things they wanted to see if there was going to be any support from a majority of them, and that would be no commercial uses, a restriction against subdivision, except for there's 2 lots that meet the current VR designation, and a ground cover. VN has a 30% ground cover, whereas VR, the existing, has 10%. So the board said they wanted to see no more than 15%, I think is what they were looking for. And they wanted to know that there would be some entity that would hold a conservation restriction for that in perpetuity, so it wouldn't be a private restriction that would expire after 30 years. So it's not settled yet. It was continued to the 10th. I'm not sure where this one is going, so.
So just so I understand, so that wouldn't conform to zoning, it would be like a covenant, but, well, with the additional things that you've added, so it wouldn't lapse like a covenant.
Correct. The issue is too that there's a principle called contract zoning where you can't say we'll only zone it if something happens. So they would have to present that this is, in place on their own.
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying.
So the board can't say it's rezoned subject to something. It either
But
is
if they go and put the restriction in place, then they'll come and have likely a successful.
And a similar principle was done, for example, at the Don Allen site. When that was put into a commercial zone, there were a number of restrictions that they agreed to at that site.
And this is still what the zoning it's switching to is the closest thing then to what you're talking about. There's no other zoning that you would recommend that would be more conforming to what they're actually trying to accomplish?
Unfortunately, this area was already rezoned once. Mm-hmm. This had been in LUG 1 prior, and everything was pretty much non-conforming. So the change from LUG 1 to village residential brought the properties into conformance. But some of I would say the inhabitants are unhappy with the ground cover, which went from 7 to 10%, but they're
not to 40%.
But I'm sorry, did the owners, this is Don Allen, I think, isn't it 11 and 13 Chatham, or?
The middle one is where the Jeep and the inspection station
The inspections
is.
are, yeah.
But the others around it are mostly residential houses.
Right.
So I guess what the board discussed is there isn't a really perfect district here that matches everyone's
complicated
desires.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
All right.
We'll wait. 56.
56 is on Rugged Road. Mm-hmm. It is a property that is it was 139,000 square feet. So it's
Just 5 acres?
it's in a district. Lug 1 requires 80,000 square feet minimum. So right now it is restricted to 1 lot. The article proponent said they had picked R20 because that's the zoning district across the street, which is the area in blue. R20, remember, is a half acre. So this is a dramatic change from half acre on one side to 80,000 on the other side. They offered to change this to LUG 1, which is within the scope because it's more restrictive than the R2. And the board discussed, and some of the board members were sympathetic. There's personal issues that were expressed. Ultimately, however, the board made a negative recommendation here. There was testimony from abutters, and I guess there was some consideration of, whether some sort of private restriction could be placed here, but again, without that in hand, I think the board decided not to support, and I think that was that unanimous?
I believe it was, yeah.
So that is a recommendation of no action on that property.
Take no action.
Take no action.
Yeah.
Was there any specific reason?
Well,
know the abutters are?
No.
Because it abuts Beach Plum. So I think it's just.
The abutters were vocal.
This is Beach Plum right here.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, we didn't have Beach Plum abutters. We had the people on the other side.
Right.
Yep. And some of them felt, they were already impacted by Beach Plum. They didn't want to see additional development. It was pointed out it was purchased after, after that project, so it wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't the original owner that had been affected by it. And there is an option for a covenant property. A covenant property could still be created on the lot. It's not the same financial issue there. If it were to be divided by going from LUG 2 to LUG 1, it could be 3 LUG 1 lots, and that was felt to be too high. Of course, the R20 would be even more. So.
Okay.
Other questions?
Motion to support?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Article 57, also a citizen article. This is out in Tom Nevers. The property owner here is located in the LUG 3 district, like all of this area. He proposed to go to LUG 1. They brought in quite a bit of, information about the surrounding areas. You can see the ABC streets to the
This abuts that?
to the west are at a significantly higher density. The properties kind of on the north side are roughly 40,000 square feet or so. The board ended up, I think, in the same position as the last one. While they're sympathetic to the personal issues, the Tom Nevers group had done an area plan, and they were opposed to this. And in the end, the board, and I think unanimously as well, recommended no action on this matter.
Sensitive.
Did this one feel was this a little closer, do you think?
Yes.
Like from your perspective, in terms of things I've seen us do before, this feels a little bit more like going down by Augie's Pit over there, where we've sort of done this sort of thing in the past. I feel like I'm not the expert.
I think there was some sympathy towards the fact that as the property owner brought up, right next door is, quite a different story than where
when you drive down that road, you feel like that's what you're going by, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he is one of the original owners of that area. I think he stated he bought it in 1977. Many of the properties that are located in this grid subdivision, this is from 1916. It had been it had been in tax title and all of this, and then suddenly that all came to life again around that time. And his position is, they moved out there, it was isolated and no one there, and then suddenly, like a field of mushrooms, they all start growing next to him, and then he's stuck in the middle. the board talked about, something maybe in between, like more LUG2 versus LUG1, but in the end, without, I guess, more of a neighborhood conversation, more of a sort of a unified approach, they felt that the timing wasn't right here.
Thank you.
And the board did recommend that the neighborhood plan be reevaluated because it's 10 years old and things have changed to some extent since then.
And if they did reevaluate it and came back and said, you know what, these are more ABC-like than the other side of the street like, then he could always present it again and probably have a ruling more in line with what he was hoping to get this time. Okay.
If we could just real quick go back to that other article, because Jill asked the question. On Rugged Road, that lot is a little over 3 acres. The tax assessor information is wrong.
Okay, because I thought originally it was 5 acres, and I don't know why I thought that, but
There's a piece that was cut off.
Okay.
That really doesn't work for me.
no, I know that made it much more. Well, whatever.
No, I meant my 80,000. 43,000 and something.
Yeah, well, you'll have to take.
We're gonna have to reevaluate what a mile is pretty soon. Okay.
I know.
Alrighty.
So we need a motion on 57, is that what?
Yes, we need a motion on 57.
Okay, motion to support.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Article 58, this is a proposed citizen article, who's also a member of the HDC, changing the height in the Mid-Island area. This is an article that the Planning Board and the Planning Commission have voted unanimously to oppose. This is an article that came out of the master plan. It was recommended to allow basically some more design freedom in this very small area of the island, which is a mixed-use residential commercial around the Stop and Shop, and a small area out by the airport. There's many reasons why the board opposed this. I mean, number one, 30 feet is not a historical height. There was no real study of that when it was adopted. It's a one-size-fits-all designation that came out of the 1972 zoning, which was based on the height of the fire ladder at the time, which is not an unreasonable.
Not a bad idea.
Not an unreasonable consideration. However, that has changed quite drastically, as I think you know. And there are areas of the island which are appropriate for lower height, which we've implemented. This is, again, a very small area around the Stop and Shop. It was recommended in the master plan to encourage upper floor development of dwelling units in an area that could be car-free, where you could walk to basically the Stop and Shop, the schools, the hospital, pretty much everything. And the HDC is not forced to approve the height of any building. And they don't. They've only really considered one building, and there's really only been one approval in this area, which was directly across from Marine Home Center. So they retain all control on the height of the building, the bulk of the building, and this is essentially walking back something that was already voted on unanimously by the town.
Just a couple of years ago, right?
Just a couple of years ago. We had testimony mostly from several property owners opposed to this. We did have Mr. Atherton, who was testifying in favor.
Is the Craig property in this district?
The Craig property is.
And is that what this is about?
There's no development proposal for the Craig property. I know I think you may have all seen, there was a drawing for the fire station that received a lot of criticism.
Oh, sure.
From everyone, including
the circular townhomes.
That had
The affordable housing.
The Coliseum.
Yes, the Coliseum at that corner.
Mm-hmm.
That was really just done by an off-island architect to show something.
Yeah.
It was not a serious proposal to build those buildings there.
And on this particular one, Val's gonna come and speak to us on Thursday.
Oh, she is, okay, so we'll ask her what it's about.
Let's wait for her, respect for her.
We'll have Val also talk to
Okay.
us. Thank you, Andrew.
I want you to know that we're very seriously opposed to this article, though.
Okay.
And if it is called for discussion, we intend to vigorously oppose it.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I remember the discussion last time, and they were talking about how they were going to be able to add dormers and make buildings look nicer if they could have the additional 5 feet. And I remember the one woman standing up in the audience going, "I'm 5 feet tall, and you want to make it that much taller?" And I thought, I love town meeting. You can't make this stuff up.
Well, and I think I'd ask you also to consider there's numerous buildings that far exceed 40 feet in this general area. New Boys and Girls Club, hospital, the school, which is 55 feet. So,
41 feet.
and we're not talking anything near that.
Thank you. 59.
The residential event facility. So this was going to add a definition about rental wedding facilities.
Oh, gosh. Anything to do with it.
There was extensive opposition to this, like there was the year before when a similar type article was proposed. I would say mostly from, it was an owner of a property in Tom Nevers was present, where there's been some complaints, nothing recently, I would say, but many people who are engaged in wedding-related businesses who felt this was going to impact them. The planning board unanimously recommended not to, or I guess recommended no action or opposition to this article.
Does the planning board have is there any discussion though, or even just in zoning theory, the stuff that you're so good on, about when sort of a residential use takes on a commercial feel?
Yeah. Yes, and we're enforcing that now. So again, a rental or a wedding use in a residential home is a perfectly acceptable accessory use to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the tent bylaw has said, okay, 3 of those, maybe some without those. But when we find that a house is just solely being offered for wedding venues, it crosses the line into commercial. And we do have enforcement going on some properties that
you have the means to enforce that doesn't take a thing like this.
I will tell you that there is arguments coming back from the owners that this is allowed, and so it's a burden to prove our case, but we can do it, and we will.
I mean, because I have a visceral reaction against this when I read it, but then I think and I start to feel a little more sympathetic to the butters a little bit if someone really has found a workaround and is running a business in a residential zone.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
A motion to support?
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Article 60 is another citizen article that a similar proposal was made last year by Mr. Cohen. This article is motivated on, I guess, allowing for kind of promoting the creation of covenant units in outlying areas where you might have an oversized lot in the country district. It's been focused somewhat on properties in Tom Nevers. There's a household there that has been trying to work out an issue. The bylaw has some problems according to town council. They feel that it may be too close to the article that came last year, so it would qualify as a repetitive petition. Mr. Cohen doesn't agree with that, so they may have to work that out. He is also proposing some amendments before the board, so the board hasn't quite come to an agreement on this, and this will be up for the 10th.
Okay, thank you.
This is the one where the divorce is really one person who's created this entire mess.
Thank you. Article 61.
Article 61, Mr. Atherton has proposed. This is an article, a similar article came before the town meeting in the past. This probably would end up as a home rule petition in order to become viable. I have many issues with this bylaw. And we did receive, I don't know if you've received an opinion from Judith Cutler from Town Council on this?
I don't think I have.
Okay. We'll make sure that that comes to you. I think it questions, I think there's no question that having a liability, you know, for someone who's building in a hazardous type area is a good thing to have. But tying it necessarily to a building permit for, quote, construction is on the coercive side here. Mr. Atherton's example was there's several properties in Baxter Road that are actually being moved into the public right-of-way. And so there's a clear connection there. There's a clear special allowance being made that where you can negotiate something like this. Here, we just don't see that connection. Someone who's renovating a kitchen has to sign a waiver that the town is exempt from any liability caused by erosion. I don't really see the direct connection to some of that. His definition of land affected is shorefront land, which is land that touches the harbor, the Atlantic Ocean, the Sound, and then property 300 feet from that. Well, some of those properties extend far inland. They're conservation properties. So properties, for example, back on, what's that way? Yeah, Maddoxsham, and I'm thinking of the Wigwam Way would be affected by this. I'm also, as a manager of a department, I don't see that, you know, us collecting insurance waivers and other things are really, I don't think it belongs in our department. I think insurance waivers, you know, might be better situated in Brian's department, if at all.
He was just asking for that the other day.
Was he? I think that's a great idea.
He wants to collect them himself.
Because insurance, I mean, I think, as he will admit, insurance matters are handled there. So.
Until this article came up.
So anyway, I have some concerns about this. The board hasn't come to a final decision on it.
I mean, this one certainly catches our attention that finance and planning were split on this the last time around, because how often do we see that?
That's true.
So I think it has our scrutiny, certainly, to try to understand why that was. I'm not sure the downside, your notion that the shorefront properties extend quite a ways in, I'm not sure as a practical matter why that matters.
It matters because it's affecting properties that are far from the water.
But they're not going to have the erosion liability, you know.
Yes, they are, the way it's written.
Understanding they'll have the waiver, but as a practical matter, the waiver would never come into, or the indemnity would never come into play.
Years, I mean, the shoreline receipts.
Right, so in the meantime, so we're on Wigwam Road saying to people.
Tell me where Wigwam is again, Andrew, I'm sorry.
Wigwam is off Russell's Way, which is, I would say, substantially inland from the shore, surrounded by conservation land. So for the renovation of their bathroom, we're now arguing with them for a coastal erosion waiver. I really ask yourselves if you want to be doing this, because I can tell you as a department head, I don't.
So is that the heart of the matter for you? The cost of this is the kind of operational impact to implement it?
There's the cost to that. I think there's a question of whether this is properly something that's related to zoning. I don't think it is. I think preventing certain buildings from being developed in, you know, unstable areas, that's a proper purpose of zoning. But I don't think securing insurance waivers is. And I believe town council says that. Town council says this is not necessary. So there's some other points to
Do we have that opinion from town council?
Yeah,
or do you
they
get
sent it to us ages
on
ago.
this one?
No, this is the recent one from
That letter
Judith
we
Cutler.
don't have.
Okay. Well, we'd definitely be interested
Yeah, we
to
need to
see
get
that.
that.
And I do take your point about the misapplication of zoning for other purposes know, but I'll be interested to look at her letter for her reason on why we don't need it.
Yeah, and I believe our building commissioner feels strongly about that too. And again, he's the one tasked to enforce this.
Because it just mucks up the whole building permit process.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There is a
brand new house,
general
it's one
problem with many of these bylaws that tying everything back to a building permit, that is not, it's not correct. A building permit is issued based on a state building code and based on zoning and some other factors, not whether things are good or bad or
It's like opposing sewer to keep people from building houses as opposed to whether they should have sewer. Okay, I got it.
I think it's scaring our building commissioner, our new one, a little bit here.
62, you'll be ruling on in February?
So 62 is just, it's, because this has been submitted as a general bylaw, it raises questions here. As we've already talked about, we have an existing demolition delay bylaw, which is part of zoning. The building commissioner enforces it because it's part of zoning. It's part of, again, what he's properly intended, you know, that's what he does. This being put as a general bylaw, the enforcement of general bylaws is typically by police officers and other personnel. So it's got a problem there. As a home rule petition, so obviously a home rule petition would have to be written for this, and that would allow the HDC to implement this, which if you look at their legislation, they have full authority right now over the demolition of any structure.
Right, HDC does, don't they?
Right.
Correct, anything.
And they could say that, does it have to be before 50 years? That's where she threw me off, was this 50 years.
No, any structure.
Right.
Yes, all
I mean, this happens all the time.
Exactly. And so I think town council, again, this secondary opinion raises this issue, like, why is this necessary? Because the HDC has, it's written in their original legislation, it talks about the raising of buildings. No structure shall be raised without a certificate of appropriateness from the HDC. And I think there may be some disagreement over a house on Center Street or something is what I'm hearing. But that structure wasn't just, it's an older structure which was allowed to be deconstructed. It had apparently some significant damage, powder post, beetles, fires, this, that, and the other thing that, according to the HDC record, were carefully considered before it was allowed. And, you know, I might add that if you disagree with their position, there is an appeal route, which starts right here, directly to the selectmen, to have that looked at. So again, I'm concerned about this. This is yet another bylaw tied back to a building permit, at least as a general bylaw, which I think fails a test. There's a case called the Spenlenhauer case, which comes from Barnstable, which says you don't put zoning matters into a general bylaw. And then, so we go back to the HDC. Do they need this? Do we need to go to the state legislature to amend their special act to add this? From at least an initial conversation with their chair, I think the answer is no.
Okay.
That there are ways to amend your internal procedures if there's a problem.
We had Mary in to speak to us about it a couple of meetings ago, and we also asked her, if, you know, what's the magic between 12 months, as an example? Couldn't it be 6 months or something more reasonable, because 12 months is a long time to wait. So we were waiting until we heard from you before we decided to rule on this. And I think we'll wait till we have Stephen and...
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
As an anecdote, I mean, the Center Street property, which I also heard this was sort of the kind of catalyst to this. How long did it take to actually demolish or deconstruct? I mean, was it, I presume it was still months and months and months before whatever they didn't like happened.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty...
It wasn't like it took them 2 weeks and all of a sudden they tore the house down, right? I mean, I'm sure it took a long time.
No, and it's numbered, and there's, you know, it's some of it had to be treated for powder post beetles on the property, and I think a lot of the elements are there, and I believe the property at least is intended to look how it did before it was deconstructed, using many of the pieces in it. So it's not like, you know, it's just gone and hauled to the dump. It's right.
Yeah, we have an opinion from town council on this one too, it's in the same letter.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Yeah, if you would, that'd be great.
I think that letter came yesterday or today.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's new.
Yesterday,
Okay,
yeah,
thanks,
right.
Leslie. And then 63 and 64, we have Mr. Lowell coming in on Thursday to speak to us as well.
Right, and I think what we understand with both of these is that neither of these are binding. You know, they're directives to create a bylaw.
Oh, I see, to
Okay.
create and enforce legislation and regulations.
But I think, and again, there's a discussion, and we're concerned a little bit about Article 63 because I don't want people to think that we can come up with a restriction that meets this. It's basically a open-ended rate of development bylaw, which has already been ruled unconstitutional. I just don't want people to get expectations, well, that's doable. I think you understand, hopefully you understand that what we're talking about here is, this is 9 permits would be issued for dwellings, and then we're looking for number 10.
You'd pull the black card.
Hoping affordable, which is not defined here,
Right.
Before the next 9 permits can go out.
Right.
You're
So-
punishing the 9th person to pay for it, to move on, just basically.
Right.
And there's an opinion from town council on this one too.
Good.
Yeah.
Same letter.
Good.
And the last one, you know, again, I think there's some impractical aspects of that as well, which again, 500 feet from property, what are they photographing? And again, there has to be an actual cause from that particular development.
Right.
And again, I'm of the opinion that, and I think I'm well versed here, is that the public roadway, which includes the shoulders as well as the infrastructure in it, are the oversight of our DPW. Again, that enforcement comes from DPW and police officers. When that infrastructure is damaged, there's enforcement action that is instituted by them. And again, there can be all kinds of damage to infrastructure that has nothing to do with building permits.
Mhm.
So,
Wind is a big factor here.
right. Car accidents, ice.
I've had it, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Andrew and Leslie. Thank you for being
Thanks,
here.
that was really helpful.
It was really helpful.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
all your time.
Yep.
Complicated.
Some of the stuff is complicated.
That's
Good, so, folks, motion, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.